Orchestrated fresh memoir narrative with new characters, realistic American details, and emotional arc matching. Proven formula. Orchestrated fresh memoir narrative with new characters, realistic American details, and emotional arc matching. Proven formula. The folding chair under me had a wet ring on the seat from somebody's water glass, and I remember thinking that was about right. I'd gotten the cheap chair pulled in from the garage while everybody else got the good ones, and now I had a damp spot soaking through the back of my one nice dress. My mother stood up at the head of the table, tapped her fork against her glass, and in front of 22 people she said, "One of my girls is marrying into the Ashfords. The other one scrubs office buildings at night." She let that sit there a second. Then she smiled like she'd said something tender. "We love them both the same, of course." Pierce's father, the man my sister was marrying into money to be near, reached into his blazer, slid $100 bill across the tablecloth past the gravy boat, and stopped it right next to my plate. "Here, honey," he said. "Treat yourself to something. You work too hard." A couple of people laughed, the nervous kind, where they don't know if they're allowed to. I didn't cry. I picked up the bill, folded it once, slid it under the edge of my plate where it'd be safe, and said, "Thank you. That's generous." And I watched my mother's face do this little flicker, because the thing she wanted, the flinch, the red ears, the excuse to leave early, I wasn't going to hand it to her. Not this time. What none of them knew, sitting around that table with the good china my mother only used for the Ashfords, was that the building Pierce had spent the whole dinner bragging about, the brand new tower with his name on the lease office, was on my client list. My company kept it standing. And my grandmother, 81 years old, sitting 2 seats down with her hands folded over her cardigan, had been waiting 11 years for somebody to say the thing she was about to say. She set down her fork. She stood up slow, the way she does now, and she looked right at my mother. "But before I tell you what she said, I want you to do one small thing for me. If you have ever sat at a table where the people who are supposed to know you best treated you like a stranger they were embarrassed by, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I read them. All of them. Now let me back all the way up, because that $100 bill didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of 33 years. My mother had me late, and she had my sister Bryn first, and from the start, those were 2 different jobs to her. Bryn was the pretty one. And I mean that the way my mother meant it. Like a profession. Like a plan. By the time Bryn was 10, my mother had her in pageant classes she paid for by skipping her own dentist appointments. Bryn got the braces. Bryn got the dance lessons and the new clothes the first week of school. I got Brennan's old clothes a year later, washed soft and pilled, and a flat sense that I was the kid who came along after the one that counted. My dad, Hal, everybody called him, worked the loading dock at a paper distributor for 31 years, and never once complained out loud, which I used to admire and now I'm not so sure about. He went quiet instead of cruel, which feels different but lands in the same place when you're a kid waiting for somebody to take your side. My mother filled the silence for both of them. She was the talker. She narrated our whole family to the neighbors and the church ladies and her sister down in Tennessee, and in that story, Bryn was going places and I was the cautionary tale, the slow one, the one who'd find her level. I want to be honest with you, because the easy version of this story is that I was perfect and they were monsters, and that's not true. I was a quiet, stubborn, watchful kid who didn't perform well on demand, and my mother read that as dull. She'd ask me a question at the dinner table and answer it herself before I got my mouth open. I learned early that talking just gave her more to correct, so I stopped. And then she'd tell people I never had anything to say. The clearest memory I have of being 12 is the refrigerator. Our fridge was a shrine to Brennan pageant ribbons, honor roll certificates, a clipping from the county paper when she made homecoming court. I came home one day with a regional award for a science project on water testing, an actual plaque with my name engraved on it, and I held it up at dinner and my mother said, "That's nice, put it somewhere," and went back to talking about Bryn's dress fitting. I found a spot for it on the fridge that night. By the weekend, it had migrated to a drawer in the hutch, behind the spare batteries. I didn't move it back. I'd already started to understand that there was only room for one daughter's name on the front of things. The one person who saw me was my grandmother, my mom's mother, Maeve. She'd raised 4 kids on a switchboard operator's salary and then on a cafeteria manager's salary, widowed at 44, and she did not have a high tolerance for people who looked down on work. She used to take me on Saturdays, just me, and we'd go to the diner, where she knew all the cooks by name, and she'd make me order for myself and look the waitress in the eye when I did it. "You say thank you like you mean it," she told me once. "And you tip like you remember being broke, because you are going to remember being broke." She was the only adult who asked me what I thought about things and then actually waited for the answer. When I told my family I wasn't going to a 4-year school, that I was going to the community college and getting a certificate in building maintenance and facilities, you would have thought I'd announced I was joining a circus. My mother put her hand on her chest like I'd hurt her physically. "A janitor," she said. "You want to be a janitor." Bryn was at the state university by then on loans my parents co-signed without blinking, studying communications. And here I was wanting to learn boilers and HVAC and electrical, and to my mother, those were not careers, those were what you ended up as when you failed at having a career. My grandmother drove me to my first day. In the parking lot she put the car in park and said, "Your mother thinks dignity is a thing you're handed by people richer than you. I spent 50 years learning it's a thing you build with your own 2 hands, and nobody can take it back. You go in there and you learn how the world actually works. Most people have no idea. You're about to." Then she made me get out and go. So I went. I learned how a building breathes. I learned why the 3rd floor of a hospital floods if you don't stay ahead of one specific valve, and how a chiller plant fails, and what's actually growing in the ductwork of a school nobody's inspected in 20 years. I got a job at 19 on a night cleaning crew for a commercial outfit, $11 an hour, because that was the door that was open, and my grandmother had taught me that you walk through the open door and stop being precious about it. I mopped lobbies in office towers from 10 at night to 6 in the morning, and while I mopped, I watched. I watched how badly the company I worked for was run. The owner was a guy named Frank who'd built it in the 80s and stopped caring around 2005. Crews showed up late or not at all. Clients were furious. Supplies got stolen. I started fixing things on my own shift just because the disorder bothered me, rerouting the crew so we hit the high-traffic floors first, flagging a slab leak in a law firm's server room at 2 in the morning that would have cost them their files if I'd waited till someone official noticed. The building manager there, a tired woman who'd been up all night with a sick kid, looked at me like I'd hung the moon. She started asking for me by name. I want to stop here and address the thing some of you are already thinking, because I thought it too, for years. Why didn't I just tell my family what I was doing as it grew? Why let them believe the worst? And the honest answer is, I tried. I tried more than once. I'll get to those tries, and they're the part that still makes my jaw tight. But understand that I wasn't sitting on a secret to be a martyr. Every time I opened my mouth about my work, somebody in that family closed it for me. After enough years of that, you stop offering up the soft parts to people who only want to step on them. When I was 24, Frank told me over a gas station coffee that he wanted out. He was tired, his knees were shot, and his kids didn't want the business. He'd sell me the client contracts and the equipment for 40 grand, which I did not have. I had $800 and a credit score I'd been protecting like a newborn. So I went to the Small Business Administration, and I went to a credit union my grandmother had banked at since the Carter administration, and I put together a loan with her co-signing on a chunk of it against my mother's furious objection, because somehow my mother found out, and somehow my mother's response to her daughter starting a company was, "You're going to drag your grandmother into bankruptcy." I bought the company. One cargo van with a bad transmission, 3 floor machines, and 19 accounts, most of them ready to walk because of Frank's last bad year. I was 25 years old. I did not tell my family I'd bought anything. I'd learned my lesson on that. What I told them, when my mother asked at Christmas what I was doing now, was that I was still in the cleaning thing. She nodded the way you nod at a child explaining a drawing. The first 2 years almost killed me. I drove the van myself, cleaned accounts myself when crews quit, did the books at the kitchen table of a studio apartment until 3 in the morning, and rebid every contract Frank had been losing. But here's what I had that Frank didn't. I actually understood the buildings. I wasn't selling, "We'll mop your floors." I was selling, "We will keep your physical plant from failing and embarrassing you in front of your tenants." That's a completely different product. And the people who manage commercial real estate will pay real money for it because the alternative is a flooded data center, or a frozen pipe, or a fire marshal shutting them down. By year 3, I had 40 accounts and 22 employees, and I'd added building engineering and HVAC service to the cleaning, because once you're already in a building every night, the owner would rather pay one company to handle everything than juggle 4 vendors. I changed the name. I called it Keystone Building Group because a keystone is the thing in an arch that everything leans on and nobody ever looks at. That felt about right. That Thanksgiving, I was 28. My mother sat me next to the kids' table, which she did when she wanted to make a point. And somebody, my Aunt Sylvia I think, asked me what I did. And I tried. "This is one of the times I'm telling you about," I said. "I actually own a building services company now. We've got about 25 employees." And before I got to the next sentence, my mother laughed. Not cruel exactly, just dismissive, the way you'd laugh at a kid who said they were going to be an astronaut. And she said, "She means she runs the cleaning crew. Don't make it sound fancier than it is. You'll embarrass yourself." And she turned to Bryn and asked about Bryn's new boyfriend, the one with the family money, the one named Pierce. I want you to sit with that for a second, because this is the part the easy version of these stories always skips. I did tell them. My mother heard I own a company and translated it, out loud, in front of everyone, into "she pushes a mop." She wasn't ignorant of the truth, she was allergic to it. The truth made the story she'd been telling for 28 years. Bryn won, the other one settled, fall apart, and she would rather rewrite reality at the dinner table than let that story die. After that, I stopped explaining. Not out of spite, out of self-preservation. There's a difference, and it took me a long time to forgive myself for not understanding that sooner. If you've ever stopped telling your own family the truth about your life, just to keep them from twisting it, I see you. Tell me about it in the comments. You're not the only one who learned to go quiet to stay safe. Bryn married Pierce when I was 30. The wedding cost more than my first year of revenue. Pierce was a commercial real estate developer, or his father was, and Pierce was the heir who got to put his name on things. The Ashfords were the kind of family that had a wing of a hospital named after a grandfather. At the wedding, my mother introduced me to Pierce's mother as "my younger one, she's in the custodial field," and Pierce's mother gave me the smile you give the help. I shook her hand. I'd already read about the building her family was breaking ground on downtown, a luxury mixed-use tower, retail and offices and condos. The biggest thing the Ashford Group had ever done. I filed it away. Meanwhile, Keystone grew. I'm going to give you the real numbers, because in these stories people always wave their hands and say, "She got successful," and I want you to feel the actual distance between what my family thought I was and what I'd built. By the time I was 32, I had over 400 employees. We held the Master Building Services contract for 2 of the 3 largest hospitals in the city, the convention center, a stadium, a federal building, and 40-some commercial properties. Annual revenue had crossed $38 million. I had a CFO, a director of operations, and a fleet of 41 vehicles. I bought a modest house and paid cash for a reliable car, and I still drove out to job sites at 5 in the morning, sometimes because I liked to see the buildings before the city woke up. I employed people the rest of the world made invisible: the third shift crews, the boiler techs, the women who cleaned the ICU so a surgeon could walk in and be a hero. I paid them more than anyone else in the market, gave them health insurance, ran an English class out of my own office twice a week. My people stayed. Some of them had been with me since the cargo van with the bad transmission. They knew exactly what I did, because they did it with me. My family still thought I scrubbed toilets at night. And here is the part where I have to tell you about the most important contract I ever signed. Because it's the gun on the wall that goes off at Thanksgiving. About a year before that dinner, the Ashford Group finished their tower. The Solera, they called it. 40 stories of glass downtown, the crown jewel. And the property management firm that runs that tower for the Ashfords put the building services master contract out to bid. Cleaning, engineering, HVAC, fire life safety coordination, all of it. The whole nervous system of the building. Keystone won it. We won it on merit, and a blind bid evaluated on technical scoring before they ever saw a price, because we were simply the best operator in the city by then. And the people who actually run buildings knew it, even if the people who pose for ribbon cuttings didn't. I signed that contract knowing my brother-in-law's family owned the tower. I didn't tell a soul in my family. Why would I? They'd never asked me a single real question about my work in a decade. The Ashfords had no idea the woman they thought was their custodial relative held the contract that kept their flagship standing. Pierce had no idea his wife's keening lady sister had his building's master keys, his mechanical drawings, his emergency protocols, and his after-hours number. So now we're back at the table, the $100 bill folded under the edge of my plate, my mother basking. Pierce mid-sentence about the Solera's occupancy rate and the celebrity chef opening on the ground floor, and the elder Ashford nodding like a king, and my sister glowing, and 22 people half listening, and me sitting in the damp chair from the garage with my hands in my lap, and my grandmother standing up. "Loretta," she said to my mother. "Slow, clear." The whole table turned. "Tell them what your daughter actually does for a living." My mother gave a little laugh. "Mom, sit down. Your dinner's getting cold. She's in building services, we all know." "No," my grandmother said. "You don't know, because you've never once asked. 11 years and not one real question. So I'll tell them." She put one hand flat on the tablecloth to steady herself, and she looked around at the cousins and the aunts and the Ashfords with their whole hospital wing. "My granddaughter owns Keystone Building Group. She started it with a loan I co-signed and $800 of her own when she was 25. She employs more than 400 people. She let that land. Last I knew, her company does close to $40 million a year." The table went the specific kind of quiet where you can hear the furnace kick on. My Uncle Dale, who'd laughed at the $100 bill, said, 40, like total? That can't be right." 40 million in revenue, my grandmother said. 400 employees. She cleans the hospitals you were born in. She runs the convention center where your daughter had her quinceañera. She holds the contract for the stadium. And then she turned, very deliberately, to Pierce. "And she holds the master contract for your tower, son. The Solera. Has for a year. Her people are the reason your glass palace has heat and water and a fire alarm that works. Maybe you'd know that if anyone in this family had ever bothered to ask her what she did instead of handing her gas money." I watched it move through them. I watched Pierce's face go from amused to confused to a kind of gray. I watched the elder Ashford set down his wine. I watched my mother's mouth open and find nothing in it. Pierce, to his credit, was the first to actually speak to me. "You? Keystone? You're the principal at Keystone?" "Founder and owner," I said. First full sentence I'd spoken all dinner that wasn't, "thank you." When my brother graduated, when my brother drew him a luxury apartment in New York, tie dear, Hauptblade, tiller upgrade, they told me the owner's calendar was booked through January. "It is," I said. My mother found her voice, and it came out thin. "This isn't, you would have told us. A daughter would have told her mother something like this." And there it was, the line she'd been resting on for a decade, that my silence was the crime, that if I'd just explained myself none of this neglect would have happened. I'd waited a long time to answer it, and I found I didn't even have to raise my voice. "I did tell you," I said. "Thanksgiving 4 years ago I told the whole table I owned a company. You laughed. You said I was making it sound fancier than it was, and you told the table I ran the cleaning crew, and then you asked Bryn about her boyfriend." I told you when I bought the business and you said I'd bankrupt Grandma. I told you, Mom, you just liked your version better. Nobody at that table said anything, because everybody at that table had been at that Thanksgiving 4 years ago, and they remembered. I could see them remembering. Why didn't you correct me? My mother whispered. Because you don't correct a wall, I said. You just stop walking into it. That's when my phone went off in my bag. I'd had it on silent, but it was buzzing hard enough that you could hear it against the chair leg, over and over. That pattern that means it's not a text, it's a call coming in back to back to back. I pulled it out. 3 missed in the last 90 seconds, all from my director of operations, and the screen lit up again right there in my hand. The Solera's after-hours emergency line. I have to take this, I said, and I stepped into the hallway and I did not close the door because by then I was done being quiet in that house. Talk to me, I said. My ops director was already moving. There'd been a major water event on the 18th floor of the Solera, a failed coupling on a riser, hundreds of gallons coming down through 3 floors of brand new condos and into the mechanical room, and the fire life safety panel was throwing faults. I could hear my whole family hearing my voice change. It drops about half an octave and goes flat and fast when something's actually on fire, metaphorically or otherwise. Shut the riser at the 18th floor isolation valve, not the main, we don't want to drop pressure to the standpipes, I said. Get the wet vac crew rolling from the convention center, they're closest, and call the restoration vendor on the emergency PO, don't wait for sign-off, I'm authorizing it. Get someone on that fire panel before it trips a full evacuation on a holiday. If it goes into alarm, we'll have the department rolling on a 40-story tower on Thanksgiving night. I'll be downtown in 30 minutes. I paused. And get me the unit owners on 18, 19, and 20. I'll call them myself. I hung up. I went back to the doorway. 22 people were looking at me like they'd never seen me before, and in a way they never had. That was your building, I said to Pierce, putting my coat on. You've got a flood on 18. My crew will have it stabilized before midnight, and you'll open tomorrow on schedule. You're welcome. Not cruel. Just true. I want to tell you that I tore them all apart. That I stood at the head of the table and gave a speech and made my mother weep into the gravy. I didn't. Because the lesson my grandmother spent 50 years teaching me is that the win isn't in the wreckage you leave. The win is in walking out the door still standing up straight, so I didn't grind them down, I just picked up my bag. But I did one thing first. I took the folded $100 bill out from under my plate, the one the elder Ashford had slid me like a tip, and I set it back down in front of him, smoothed flat. Keep it, I said. I think you might need a good vendor. My mother stood up so fast her chair tipped. Please don't go. We can talk about this. We're family. We are, I said. And I'll talk. I'll come to dinners where I'm a person and not a punchline. I'll answer any real question you ever actually want to ask me about my life. But I'm not sitting in the garage chair anymore, Mom. I'm done with that. Those are the terms. My grandmother was already reaching for her cane. I'll come with you, she said. I'd seen enough turkey for one lifetime. We walked out into the cold together, slow, her hand on my arm. In the car, she let out a long breath and laughed. This short, satisfied bark of a laugh. 11 years, she said. I have been holding that in for 11 years. How does it feel? I asked her. Like setting down something heavy, she said. How do you feel? I sat there with my hands on the wheel and the heater coming up, and my phone already buzzing with the Solera again. The most demanding building in the city needing me, 400 people depending on me, a flood to go run toward. And for the first time at that house, I wasn't leaving it carrying anything. Free, I said, and I meant it all the way down. I drove her home first. Then I drove downtown in my work boots and the nice dress, and I stood in 18 inches of standing water on the 18th floor of my brother-in-law's tower at 11 o'clock on Thanksgiving night with my crew, the people who actually knew me, and we put it right. When my brother graduated, when my father graduated, till tonight it isn't. My mother called 9 times that week. I didn't pick up for the first 6. When I finally did, she didn't apologize, Not really. She said I'd embarrassed her in front of the Ashfords, and I told her that was the last time she'd get to make my life about her embarrassment, and I hung up. It took her 3 more months to call back and actually say she was sorry. And even then, it came out crooked, half defense, the way it does with people who've never had to practice. We have lunch now, once a month, in a public place, for exactly 1 hour. She's learning to ask me questions. She's bad at it. She's trying. I've decided trying badly is allowed to count for something, as long as it keeps being trying. Bryn's the surprise. She came to my office about a month after, sat in the chair across from my desk and looked at the photos on my wall. My cruise, my grand opening. A shot of me and my grandmother in front of the first cargo van. And she cried, the real kind, the ugly kind. She said she'd known for years that I was more than what Mom said, and she'd let it stand because it made her the winner and she was sorry. I should have asked you what you did, she said. I never asked because I didn't want the answer to be bigger than mine. We're rebuilding. Slowly. When my brother graduated, my father graduated, my father bought him a luxury of harem, a luxury ark, and calls me the principal with a kind of careful respect. And we are friendly the way you're friendly with a competent stranger you happen to be related to. The Solera contract renewed in the spring. I signed it at my own desk, on my own time, and afterward I sat there a minute looking at the photo of the cargo van. My grandmother turned 82 in May. I took her to the diner, the same one, and she made me order for both of us and look the waitress in the eye, and she watched me leave a tip that would have made the 25-year-old version of me gasp, and she patted my hand and said, "You remembered being broke." I did. I always will. That's the whole thing, really. That's what my mother never understood and my grandmother knew before I was born. That the work other people are embarrassed to be near is the work the whole world is standing on, and the people who do it are not beneath you. They're underneath you in the way the foundation is underneath the house. I don't need my mother to understand what I built. I used to. I lie awake some nights composing the speech that would finally make her see me. I don't write that speech in my head anymore. I run a company that keeps the city's hospitals clean, and its towers standing, and its people, 400 of them, paid and insured and seen. My grandmother saw me when no one else did, and she lived long enough to stand up at that table and say it out loud, and that turned out to be the only witness I ever actually needed. The buildings don't know my name. The people in them don't either. They walk into a warm lobby and a clean ICU and a tower that doesn't flood, and they never think about who made that happen. And that used to feel like the loneliest thing in the world. It doesn't anymore. I know. My crews know. My grandmother knew. And the chair I sit in now, I built it myself, and nobody gets to pull it out from under me ever again. The cheap garage chair is the part I keep coming back to. My mother put me in it on purpose, and for years I let her, because somewhere along the way, I decided that if I just stayed quiet and kept showing up, the truth would eventually speak for itself. It doesn't, by the way. The truth needs somebody willing to say it out loud. That's the first thing I'd want you to take from all this. Look at how the dominoes actually fell. My mother chose the comfortable story over the real one, over and over, and that choice didn't just hurt me. It cost her. She missed 11 years of her own daughter. Loretta wasn't punished by some outside force. She lost me because of what she did. Plainly, the way a bridge falls when you stop maintaining it. And I didn't end up running a $40 million company because the universe felt sorry for me. I ended up there because I drove that cargo van with the bad transmission, did the books at 3 in the morning, and learned how a building actually breathes when everyone around me thought that knowledge was beneath them. Cause and effect. We earn our outcomes in the small hours when nobody's clapping. If you're young and somebody's already written you off, I want you to hear 3 things, because they're the only 3 that ever carried me. The first is to do honest work. Honestly. Pay your people more than the market. Treat the invisible crews like the foundation they are, and put the $100 bill back on the table instead of grinding the man who slid it. Your integrity is the one asset nobody can repossess. The second is to keep your eyes open and actually learn how the world is built. The valves, the contracts, the people, the patterns. My grandmother Maeve used to say most folks have no idea how anything around them works, and being the person who does changes everything. The third and the hardest is to refuse to quit when the easy thing is to fold. The night the Solera flooded, I stood in 18 inches of water in my one nice dress because I'd spent 15 years building the kind of hands that run toward the failure instead of away from it. Bryn told me she never asked what I did, because she was afraid the answer would be bigger than her life. Don't be Bryn at 30. Ask the people around you what they actually carry. You might be sitting across from someone holding up half the city. I'm not in the garage chair anymore. I built my own and I built it well, and nobody gets to pull it out from under me again. That's not revenge. That's just what happens when you stay honest, stay sharp, and refuse to fall down.